Welcome to Sales Bites by Journey, where we talk about everything you need to know to be a killer at sales. I'm your host, Will Jenkins. Let's get it.
Hello, and welcome to Sales Bites by Journey. Today we have Cassie Quien, VP of Commercial at REPWR. Cassie, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Will. I'm excited to chat with you.
Absolutely. It's crazy. You're one of the people that I feel like I've known for longer than I actually have because of LinkedIn. I meet all my internet friends in real life at conferences and stuff. So it was a pleasure to meet you at the Broker Carrier Summit. I was like, oh my gosh, I've known you, but I really didn't. So it's cool.
I know. I made you give me a hug because I'm like, I know you, but we've never met. So that was
cool.
Yeah,
it was awesome. So really appreciate you joining Sales Bites today. Before we dive in with your intro, I would love to hear your fun fact.
Okay. My fun fact, this took me a minute to kind of think of, but I own over 300 pair of shoes.
Whoa.
So I am an avid shoe collector, and it's really sad now because I've worked from home. I've worked fully remote for the last 3 to 4 years. So I don't really get to wear them. So when I go to conferences, like where we saw each other, I was actually just in Chattanooga earlier this week, visiting REPWR. I pack the biggest suitcase because I bring 8 to 10 pair of shoes for 2 days. So
honestly,
huge shoe collector.
I also like shoes, but I don't have that many, and I can respect a good shoe game. So love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a 10,000 foot overview of some of the stuff that you've done in your career, then we'll dive in and talk some sales bites.
Yeah, for sure. Actually kind of funny. I feel like it starts best with shoes. Before I got into transportation, I actually sold shoes at Nordstrom just on the sales floor in college. And that was probably my favorite job I've ever had. Sorry to my employer or prior employers, but I loved the hustle of working in a full commission environment and just that customer interaction. But getting into transportation, once I graduated school, I didn't really know what to do with a marketing degree. And I have a brother who's in the industry, and he said, why don't you apply at a trucking company? So I worked at an asset-based trucking company in the Minneapolis area for around 7 years after school, and did every role from dispatching drivers, planning trucks, throughout the whole operation, to then progress into leadership roles, largely customer facing.
Nice.
So I have a strong asset background, a lot of time in that space. And then prior to joining REPWR, I spent a couple years at Freightbana, another startup in the industry, which you guys are probably familiar with. And that's where I think I discovered my love for trailers and what that means to our industry. Learned some really cool things there. Did an awesome journey on the sales side. And then I met the REPWR team, and what we're doing in this space is really just connecting a lot of that excess trailer capacity that's out there with all these different drivers or brokers who need access to trailers, but aren't looking to get into lease agreement or actually have the capital to purchase their own trailers. So
nice.
I'm only 1 month in with REPWR, but it has been phenomenal. This team is just brilliant. And I think there's just an incredible road ahead for what we're going to do.
Absolutely. You guys have a great team, and congrats on the new role. I know that you're going to keep crushing it. So it's really cool to hear a little bit of how you got to where you are. So the first topic that we're going to attack here is going to be the importance of patience in sales. So you've been in sales for quite some time, large opportunities, asset sales, everything in between. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of patience.
Yeah, this is something that I think it is so important, and maybe often not taken to the full level that it can be. So often I think people who are in sales, they want quick results. They want, they want to close the deal now. They want to move on to the next and keep things going. And I think being in this startup sector has really taught the importance of patience, because oftentimes starting in a startup, you have to coach your prospect on your brand and what you do. And that's not necessarily always going to be an immediate quick sale. And I think that shows through also in just the conversations you're having, the consistent but patient follow-up, careful so you're not annoying. I just think it's something that we overlook a lot because we're in an instant gratification culture.
It's interesting that you mentioned something there, consistent follow-ups, but not being annoying. So we do a lot of different sales engagements here with our consulting clients where we talk about how to stay relevant with an opportunity, but not be spammy. So how do you master that in between where you're trying to keep an opportunity warm, but the timing might not be right?
Yeah. I think about a lot like how I want to be sold to. And while that might not be how everyone wants to be sold to, there's certain products I've reached out to bring on as like sales enablement tools. And I think in a lot of those structures, their sequencing is like reach out 3 times a week, and you just keep it's spammy and you start deleting it. And so my approach, I feel like, and it's not uncommon, but it's just so much more human, where you give someone time in between. If you reach out 3 times in 1 week or once a month, like you're still getting in front of them, especially if you've already gotten to a point where they're not in a place to work with you today. But following up with like industry information or specifics on the product or service that you have and how it integrates into their world, like not even necessarily, honestly, very rarely asking for a phone call or asking for something from the prospect that you're working with, but staying relevant to show that you know what you're talking about and you know how you can help them. I feel like, that's the approach that I try to take, just to be careful with it, but very thoughtful.
I think the best sales reps I've ever coached and worked with have that same approach. So you get to the point where your product could be a fit.
Yeah.
Timing is off. You've made a connection with someone and now you're playing this game like, all right, when is it going to work? But if you're too on top of it, you're spammy and they don't want to listen to you. So you got to find a way to be an industry expert to present information for them.
Yeah. And I think that's where that patience comes in, because I think there are certain sales reps who will try a careful approach, try not to be spammy with it, but they'll give up after 2 or 3 tries and they'll let it die. And then they'll try and follow up in a year from now. And it's like, they don't know who you are anymore. They don't know what's changed and what you're doing. Some of the best, just at least relationships I've built, I often ask for their feedback especially once they become a customer of, what worked for you, what's the approach. And the feedback is often that you were respectful of my time and you weren't annoying. And it's like they have plenty of people that bug the shit out of them all day. Sorry.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I do. So when you think about, large opportunities that you've worked through, a lot of times the best opportunities don't close immediately. It is a marathon, not a sprint. So talk to us about how you manage your ability to stay patient. So not even, not spamming the customer, but how do you maintain the right mindset to say, hey, I'm going to keep at this. I'm going to keep at this.
I think that took time and it takes practice. Prior to joining REPWR, a lot of my focus was on enterprise shippers, and that is far from a quick close. A lot of times that would be 12 to 18 months before you got your first opportunity to actually work with them. And so I think initially when I started that cycle, like I didn't have patience. I was frustrated if you get an opportunity to price something and, the negative feedback or they're not going to onboard you. I think it just takes being able to see what's the big picture. What's going to, the work you put in today is what moves the needle 6 to 12 months down the line. And having that mentality that you're always building on something, and just the importance of like that pipeline that you're creating. So the patience for me, I guess, comes through in like seeing the activities I'm putting in, not necessarily like quantified, but knowing I'm putting in the thoughtful outreach and that it will come through, and having that belief in it, and a belief in the process and the belief in like your skill set. I think that plays also a huge role. It's something I could talk about for a long time too.
Tell us more about that. I'm intrigued, actually.
Oh, I don't know if you want to go into it.
What's interesting about that is the mindset part of it is probably maybe the biggest part for people, because you can have, the ability to have a conversation. You can identify good opportunities. The opportunity doesn't come to fruition. How do you stay where you need to be between the ears to not give up? That is probably the largest barrier, especially in enterprise sales, because you might be in radio silence for a while, which is tough to deal with. Yeah.
I am a huge believer and just like study a lot of how you can control your mind and your emotions. So like it sounds kind of silly to some people, but like the thoughts become things is a mentality that I follow. So just very intentional on my goals and what I want to happen. And speaking of like those enterprise sales, I would write down who I'm going to onboard, who I'm going to get business with, and I would write it down weekly. And then I would look back and you'd see 6 months later, like I made that happen. I knew it was going to come through. But you have to believe in what you're doing and your capabilities and just have conviction in it, regardless of how long it takes, especially when you're dealing with some of those larger accounts.
I agree with you. I think the intentional thoughts and being very, very focused on what you're creating makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to say that because I think very similarly and try to, impress that upon people that we work with. Like, hey, you need to make sure that you're aligned mentally to keep working through the challenges because it is a battle.
Totally.
Okay, so I took some notes on what you mentioned about the importance of patience. I want to sum up a couple things and then see if you have anything else to add. So you mentioned selling in a startup, right? A lot of times you're coaching your prospects through what the product might be. So you've got to work through that and be patient through that process. You got to be consistent, but not annoying. If you're doing that, you want to send industry info that's relevant. You've gotten feedback to be respectful of their time. So, hey, how can I make sure that I'm not just pestering you for calls consistently or whatever that might be? And then big picture thinking and controlling the way that you think individually, what your mindset is about building your book. Anything else to add when you think about the importance of being patient in sales?
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. I think the last thing would just be like, how do you remove any kind of personal element from it? So if you're not getting the response you want or getting the traction you want, like you can't take that personally because you don't know how many balls are in the air for the person that you're dealing with. So removing any kind of personal element through it and understanding that at the end of the day, it's just business. But otherwise, I think you summed it up perfect.
Awesome. These are really, really good tidbits of information, good sales bites for people to listen to and learn from. So we really appreciate you joining and talking a little bit about your experience. So thank you very much, Cassie.
Thanks, Will.